Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Daf 26 on B. Now, if you can hear the laughter in the background, that's just my brother.
He's never doing that.
It is treated like, as it is not two, it is consecrated with sacrifice. Conclude three halacha from this statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Conclude from it that an animal that was consecrated with a sanctity that was inherent in its value is deferred. One who consecrates only half an animal has consecrated the animal with a sanctity that inheres in its value, but not with an inherent sanctity, as the animal cannot be sacrificed. And second, conclude from it that not only can an offering that has already been stored to become permanently deferred from the altar, but also living animals that cannot be sacrificed for whatever reason are permanently deferred. What does that mean? If one said half this animal is designated as a burnt offering and half is designated as an animal tithe, that animal is consecrated and sacrificed as a burnt offering. This halacha is according to all opinions as stated by Abaye. That's in the Rambam Sefer Kabbalah, Teruma 3:3. And finally, conclude from it that the fill at the outset, when the animal is first consecrated, is considered a permanent disqualification. Not only is an animal that was fit to be sacrificed when initially consecrated and only later disqualified permanently deferred, but the same applies to an animal that was disqualified from the outset when it was initially consecrated, e.g., if only half of it was initially consecrated. With regard to the consecration of an animal with two sanctities, Abai said everyone conceded that in a case where one said half the animal is designated as a burnt offering and half is designated as an animal tithe, what does the footnote say? If one said half the animal is designated as a substitute and half it is designated as an animal tithe, the status of that animal is uncertain, and therefore the animal may not be sacrificed. The status is uncertain because this case is left as an unresolved dilemma in the Gemara. And that's in the Rambam Sefer Kabbalah, Hilchot Teruma 3:3. Everyone agrees that this animal is consecrated. No, I've said that. Which consecration takes effect? Both consecrations are invalid. Consecration as a substitute is valid when a consecrated animal is standing before the substitute, which is not the case here. And consecration as an animal tithe is valid through the process of passing a group of animals underneath a rod. What is the state of the animal in this case? The Gemara explains the dilemma. Is the animal sacrificed as a substitute, as the sanctity of substitution applies to all sacrificial animals, or perhaps the animal is sacrificed as an animal tithe, as the consecration of an animal tithe is more comprehensive, since if one mistakenly counted the 9th animal to pass underneath the rod as the 10th, or the 11th as the 10th, he consecrated animals that passed before and after the 10th. The Gemara states that the dilemma should stand unresolved. This mystery discusses the language that serves to affect substitution. If one said this non-sacred animal is hereby in place of that consecrated animal, or if he said it is the substitute of that consecrated animal, if one said it is the exchange for that consecrated animal, so what does the footnote say? If the owner of a non-sacred animal said, this non-sacred animal is hereby in place of that consecrated animal, or if he said it is the exchange for that consecrated animal, that non-sacred animal is a substitute, as stated in the Mishnah, Rambam Sefer Kabbalah Hilchot Teruma 2:1, that non-sacred animal is a substitute. Have I done that? If he said this consecrated animal is desacralized, with its sanctity transferred to that non-sacred animal. If the owner of the non-sacred animal said the consecrated animal is desacralized, with its sanctity transferred to that non-sacred animal, that non-sacred animal is not a substitute. Rambam Sefer Kabbalah Hilchot Teruma 2:1. And the non-sacred animal is not a substitute. And if the consecrated animal was blemished, v'im haya hekdesh ba'almum, with regard to any consecrated animal that develops a blemish, whether it belongs to the temple maidens or is an offering to be sacrificed upon the altar, or may desacralize it, with its sanctity transferred to an animal of equal value above nisha. If one person desacralized it, with its sanctity transferred to an animal of lesser value, and even if the consecrated animal was worth 100 dinars and the non-sacred animal was worth only 1 putta, the consecrated animal is desacralized, and one may derive benefit from that animal. By rabbinic law, the owner is required to conduct an appraisal to ascertain the relative value of the two animals, and if the consecrated animal is worth more than a non-sacred animal, he must pay the dividend to the temple treasury. How so? In the case where a person owned two animals, a consecrated animal worth 10 dinars that developed a blemish, and a non-sacred animal worth 5 dinars, If he said the consecrated animal is desacralized, with its sanctity transferred to that non-sacred animal, the consecrated animal is desacralized, but he must pay 5 dinars to the temple treasury, as stated in the Mishnah. On the Sefer Flora, Hilchos Avichim, Barachim 7, 8 to 9. And he said this consecrated animal is desacralized, with its sanctity transferred to that non-sacred animal. The consecrated animal is desacralized and assumes non-sacred status by Torah. By rabbinic law, the owner is required to conduct an appraisal to ascertain the relative value of the two animals. If the consecrated animal is more than the non-sacred animal, must pay the difference to the temple treasury. The question of whether living animals can be permanently disqualified is the subject of a dispute that appears in various places throughout the Talmud. Those who maintain that living animals cannot be permanently disqualified contend that the disqualification is similar to an animal that develops a temporary blemish, in which case, once the blemish heals, the animal may be sacrificed. See Yom 64b. Some explain that the reason for the opinion that living animals cannot be permanently disqualified is that if a living animal develops a blemish, it may be sold, and the blemished animal becomes non-sacred. Therefore, as the sanctity of the animal is not permanent, the disqualification of the sanctity is also not permanent. After the animal is slaughtered, there is no purpose of desacralizing the meat, and therefore disqualification is permanent. That's from the Erie. Others add that the reason behind the opinion that living animals cannot be permanently disqualified is that the disqualification of a living animal occurs before it is slaughtered, and a disqualification is permanent only when it occurs in an animal after it has been slaughtered. And that's from the Zera Abraham. So now we move on to the Gemara. The Mishnah teaches that one said this non-sacred animal is hereby in place of that consecrated animal. That non-sacred animal is a substitute. The Gemara asks, is this to say that the phrase in place of tahat is a term that indicates the association of one sanctity with another, i.e. the transference of substitution? And the Gemara raises a contradiction from a Braita. In a case where one non-sacred animal was standing before a consecrated animal belonging to the temple maintenance, and he said, this non-sacred animal is hereby the exchange for that consecrated animal. So what does the footnote say? Amar Khalifa Zavachulu. And the consecrated animal that belongs to temple maintenance does not render a non-sacred animal for which it is exchanged consecrated as a substitute. The reason is that the laws of substitution apply only to sacrificial offerings. How so? In a case where a person's non-sacred animal was standing before a consecrated animal belonging to temple maintenance, if he said, this non-sacred animal is hereby the exchange for that consecrated animal, or he said, if it is the substitute of that consecrated animal, he did not say anything of consequence. But if he said this non-sacred animal is hereby in place of that consecrated animal, or if he said the consecrated animal is desacralized, with its sanctity transferred to that non-sacred animal, his statement takes effect. The consecrated animal is desacralized, and the non-sacred animal is consecrated. This halacha is in accordance with the Braita as explained by Abaye. That's the Rambam Sefer Hilchos Avichim Barachim 7:7. Or if he said it is a substitute of that consecrated animal, he has not said anything. As these terms indicate that the transfer of sanctity by substitution, and the substitution does not apply to consecrated animals belonging to the temple maintenance. Have I said that? But if he said this non-sacred animal is hereby in place to have that consecrated animal, if he said this consecrated animal is desacralized with the sanctity transferred to that non-sacred animal, the statement takes effect, as these terms indicate desacralization, and the consecrated animal belonging to the temple maintenance can be desacralized with the sanctity transferred to a non-sacred animal. The Gemara explains the apparent contradiction, and if it enters your mind that the term tahat, in the Hebrew, is a term that indicates the associating of one sanctity with another, and therefore affects substitution, as taught in the Mishnah. What is different in the first clause of the Braita, which teaches that the terms exchange and substitute are terms that do not affect desacralization, and what is different in the latter clause of the Braita, which teaches that the term tahat affects desacralization despite the fact that it indicates substitution. Abaye said in response, you find that the term in place of tahat is sometimes a term that indicates the association of one sanctity with another, and sometimes it's a term that indicates desacralization. It's a term that indicates the association of one sanctity with another, as it is written. Let's move on to the next daf. But if the white leprous spot stays in its place, Tachteha, Leviticus 13:23. That's the end of Ad Omid, and all the best. Bye.